Catherine Mitchell stood before her bedroom mirror, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the delicate pearl necklace around her neck. The December morning light filtered through her London apartment windows, casting a soft glow across her reflection. At 28, she had everything most people dreamed of: a successful modeling career, a beautiful home, and thousands of fans who adored her. Yet as she stared at her own image, all she could see were the cracks beneath the surface. The notification sound from her phone broke through her thoughts. Another Instagram comment, probably about yesterday's photoshoot. She had posted a series of stunning pictures taken in Hyde Park, wearing an elegant emerald dress that complemented the winter scenery perfectly. The photographer had captured her laughing genuinely, snowflakes caught in her dark hair, her eyes sparkling with what appeared to be pure joy. The post had already gained over 50,000 likes and hundreds of comments from fans expressing their love and admiration. But Catherine knew the truth behind that radiant smile. She had been crying just moments before the shoot began, having received another disappointing call from her estranged mother. The relationship had been strained for years, ever since Catherine chose her career over family expectations. Her mother had wanted her to become a doctor, to follow in her father's footsteps, but Catherine's heart had always belonged to the arts, to expressing beauty and emotion through photography and fashion. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was scheduled to attend a Christmas carol service that evening at Westminster Abbey. It was a charity event supporting homeless families during the holidays, and she had been invited as one of the celebrity ambassadors. The organizers had specifically requested that she arrive looking her absolute best, as photographers would be present and the images would be used in promotional materials for next year's campaign. Catherine walked to her closet, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. She pulled out the dress she had chosen weeks ago, a stunning midnight blue velvet gown with intricate silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. It was sophisticated yet warm, perfect for a religious setting while still maintaining the elegance expected of someone in her position. As she held it against herself, she remembered the day she bought it, how excited she had been to wear something so beautiful for such a meaningful cause. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her best friend Maya, texting about meeting for coffee before the service. Maya had been her anchor through all the turbulent years of building her career. They had met during Catherine's first modeling assignment 5 years ago, when Maya was working as a makeup artist. Unlike everyone else in the industry who seemed to want something from Catherine, Maya had simply offered genuine friendship. Catherine smiled for the first time that morning as she read Maya's message. "Ready to dazzle everyone tonight? Though honestly, you could show up in pajamas and still outshine everyone else. Don't forget to eat something before the service, you know how you get when you're nervous and hungry." The concern in Maya's words touched Catherine deeply. In a world where people constantly told her how perfect her life seemed, Maya was the only one who truly saw her struggles. She knew about Catherine's anxiety attacks before big events, about her tendency to skip meals when stressed, and about the loneliness that often consumed her despite being surrounded by people constantly. Catherine sat on her bed and began typing a response when another memory surfaced. Last Christmas, she had spent the holidays alone in this same apartment. Her modeling schedule had been too busy for her to travel home to Manchester, and most of her London friends had their own family commitments. She had ordered Chinese takeout and watched old movies, scrolling through social media posts of happy families and feeling utterly disconnected from the world. That experience had motivated her to get involved with the homeless charity. If she was going to be alone during the holidays anyway, she reasoned, at least she could do something meaningful with her time. The first time she visited the shelter, she had expected to simply write a check and leave. Instead, she found herself staying for hours, talking to the residents, hearing their stories, and realizing how much she had in common with people she had never imagined relating to. There was Margaret, a woman in her 50s who had lost her job and, then, her home after a series of medical bills bankrupted her. Margaret had spoken about the shame of asking for help, about feeling invisible in a world that seemed to have moved on without her. Catherine had recognized something familiar in Margaret's eyes, the same feeling of being disconnected despite being surrounded by people. Then, there was David, a young father who had been evicted when his landlord sold the building. He worked 2 jobs but couldn't afford first month's rent and security deposit for a new place. He spoke about his daughter with such love and determination, describing how he read to her every night in their temporary shelter bed and promised her that their situation was only temporary. Catherine had been moved to tears by his strength and devotion. These encounters had changed something fundamental in Catherine. For the first time in years, she felt like her fame and success could serve a purpose beyond her own career advancement. She began visiting the shelter regularly, not for photo opportunities or publicity, but because these people had become important to her. They knew her as Catherine, not as the glamorous model from magazine covers. They asked about her day, remembered details she shared, and treated her with a warmth that felt entirely separate from her celebrity status. The Christmas carol service had become particularly significant because it represented the intersection of her public life and her private passion. Tonight, the attention and photographs would serve a cause she truly cared about. The money raised would help families like David's find permanent housing, and women like Margaret would receive job training and support services. Catherine stood and walked to her makeup table, beginning the familiar ritual of preparing for a public appearance. As she applied foundation, she thought about the photos from yesterday's shoot that had generated so much positive response from her fans. She had been experimenting with a more natural, authentic style lately, moving away from the highly retouched perfection that had defined her earlier career. The photographer, James, had encouraged her to let her guard down during the Hyde Park session. "People want to see the real you," he had said. "They're tired of perfection. Show them something genuine." At first, Catherine had resisted. Vulnerability had never been part of her professional brand. But, as the shoot progressed and she relaxed into the moment, something magical had happened. The camera captured not just her physical beauty, but glimpses of her personality, her warmth, her humanity. The response from her fans had been overwhelming. Comments poured in about how real and relatable she looked, how her genuine smile had brightened their day, how seeing her happiness made them feel hopeful about their own lives. Reading these messages, Catherine realized that her audience was hungry for authenticity in the same way she was hungry for genuine connection. As she curled her hair, Catherine reflected on how much her relationship with fame had evolved. In the beginning, she had treated her career like a performance, maintaining a carefully constructed image that she thought people wanted to see. She had been beautiful but distant, perfect but untouchable. The success had come quickly, but so had the isolation. The turning point had come during a particularly difficult period last spring. Catherine had been dealing with a stalker who had been sending increasingly concerning messages and showing up at her public appearances. The situation had made her paranoid and withdrawn, afraid to engage with fans or show any vulnerability publicly. Her management team had hired security and advised her to be even more careful about maintaining her privacy. But the isolation had nearly broken her. She had started experiencing panic attacks before events, losing weight from stress, and questioning whether her career was worth the constant fear and loneliness. It was during this dark period that Maya had suggested volunteering at the shelter as a way to reconnect with what mattered to her. The first time Catherine had walked into the shelter, she had expected to feel out of place and uncomfortable. Instead, she had found herself in a room full of people who were dealing with challenges far greater than her own, yet who welcomed her with kindness and curiosity. Nobody asked for selfies or autographs. Nobody treated her like she was different or special. She was simply another person who had come to help. That experience had begun her journey toward a more authentic way of living and working. She started being more selective about the projects she accepted, choosing work that aligned with her values rather than just her career goals. She began sharing more personal moments on social media, writing longer captions about her experiences and thoughts rather than just posting pretty pictures with generic hashtags. The change hadn't been without challenges. Some in the industry worried that she was becoming too real, that showing vulnerability would damage her marketability. A few brands had indeed pulled back from working with her, preferring models who maintained more traditional glamorous personas. But, for every opportunity she lost, she gained something more valuable: connections with people who appreciated her authenticity. Catherine finished her makeup and moved to get dressed. The midnight blue gown slipped over her head like liquid silk, the fabric settling perfectly against her curves. she added simple diamond earrings and a delicate bracelet, keeping the accessories minimal to let the dress's craftsmanship speak for itself. Looking in the full-length mirror, she felt beautiful in a way that went beyond physical appearance. She felt aligned with her values and purpose. Her phone chimed with a text from the event organizer, confirming the timing for her arrival and reminding her that there would be a brief interview opportunity before the service began. Catherine had agreed to speak with reporters about her involvement with the charity, and she was actually looking forward to the chance to share stories about the families they were supporting. She thought about what she wanted to say, how she could use this platform to bring attention to issues that mattered without seeming preachy or insincere. The key was to speak from her heart about her own experiences at the shelter, to share what she had learned from the people she had met there. As she gathered her purse and coat, Catherine felt a familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach. Not the paralyzing anxiety she used to experience before public events, but a healthy nervousness that came from caring about doing something well. She wanted tonight to be meaningful, both for the charity and for herself. She looked one final time in the mirror, seeing not just a beautiful woman in an elegant dress, but someone who had found a way to use her gifts for something larger than herself. The woman looking back at her had scars and struggles, doubts and dreams, but she was real in a way that the perfectly polished version of herself had never been. Catherine picked up her phone to text Maya that she was ready to meet, and noticed one more notification. It was a comment on yesterday's photos from a young girl who said that seeing Catherine's genuine smile had inspired her to pursue her own dreams of becoming a model, despite feeling insecure about her appearance. The comment ended with, "Thank you for showing us that it's okay to be real." Reading those words, Catherine felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was why the work mattered, why being authentic was worth the vulnerability it required. She might not be able to fix her relationship with her mother or eliminate all the loneliness from her life, but she could use her platform to help others feel less alone in the world. As she left her apartment and stepped into the London evening, Catherine carried with her not just the excitement of a beautiful event ahead, but the deeper satisfaction of knowing that her life had meaning beyond the surface glamour. Tonight would be another step in her journey toward becoming not just a successful model, but a person she could truly respect and admire. The coffee shop near Westminster Abbey buzzed with pre-evening energy as Catherine pushed through the heavy glass doors, the familiar scent of roasted beans and warm pastries enveloping her like a comforting embrace. She spotted Maya immediately in their usual corner booth, her vibrant red hair making her impossible to miss even in the crowded space. Maya looked up from her laptop and waved, her face breaking into the warm smile that had been Catherine's lifeline through countless difficult moments. "You look absolutely stunning," Maya said as Catherine approached, standing to embrace her friend. "But, more importantly, you look happy. Really happy, not just camera-ready happy." Catherine settled into the booth across from Maya, unwrapping her cream-colored cashmere scarf and draping it carefully over the back of her chair. The midnight blue dress had drawn admiring glances from other patrons, but she felt comfortable and natural rather than self-conscious. That was progress she couldn't have imagined a year ago. "I am happy," Catherine said, surprising herself with the truthfulness of the statement. Nervous, but genuinely excited about tonight. "I keep thinking about the families we're helping, and it makes everything else feel manageable." Maya studied her friend's face with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of reading people's emotions beneath their makeup. "You know, I've been doing your face for 5 years now, and I've never seen you glow like this without any professional lighting. What's changed?" Catherine accepted the lavender latte Maya had already ordered for her, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic mug. Outside the window, early Christmas shoppers hurried past with bags and packages, their breath visible in small puffs against the cold December air. The scene felt cozy and real, a stark contrast to the artificial perfection of most fashion shoots. "I think I'm finally figuring out who I want to be," Catherine said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Not just as a model or a public figure, but as a person. The work with the shelter has been changing me in ways I didn't expect." Maya leaned forward, her dark eyes intent with interest. She had watched Catherine struggle through the loneliness and pressure of fame, had held her during panic attacks and talked her through moments when the industry's demands felt overwhelming. Seeing her friend find genuine purpose and peace was something Maya had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. "Tell me about it," Maya said. I know you've been spending more time there lately, but you don't talk much about what actually happens when you're not being photographed for charity publicity. Catherine took a sip of her latte, gathering her thoughts. She had been protective of her experiences at the shelter, not wanting to exploit the people she met there for social media content or dinner party conversation. But Maya was different. Maya would understand the significance of what she was discovering. "There's this woman named Margaret," Catherine began. "She's in her 50s, used to be an accountant before medical bills wiped out her savings. She has this way of seeing right through all the nonsense, you know? Last week, I was having a particularly bad day after a difficult shoot where the photographer kept criticizing my posture, and I guess it showed on my face when I arrived at the shelter." Catherine paused, remembering the moment clearly. She had walked into the shelter feeling frustrated and demoralized, questioning her career choices and wondering if she was wasting her life on superficial pursuits. Margaret had taken one look at her and immediately started making tea, not saying anything until Catherine was seated with a warm mug in her hands. "Margaret didn't ask what was wrong or try to cheer me up with empty platitudes," Catherine continued. "She just started telling me about her daughter, who's a teacher in Birmingham. She spoke about how proud she was of her daughter's work, how much impact she was having on her students' lives, and how meaningful it felt to know you were making a difference in the world." Maya nodded, understanding immediately. "She was showing you what real purpose looks like." "Exactly. But without being preachy or making me feel bad about my career. She was just sharing what brought meaning to her life, and I realized I wanted that same sense of purpose. I wanted to feel proud of how I was spending my days, not just successful or famous." The conversation was interrupted by Catherine's phone buzzing with notifications. She glanced at the screen and saw messages from her stylist, her driver, and her publicist, all checking in about the evening's arrangements. The contrast between this world of scheduled communications and calculated appearances and her quiet conversation with Maya highlighted how different her two realities had become. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I had never become a model," Catherine said, setting her phone face down on the table. "If I had listened to my mother and gone to medical school like she wanted." Maya's expression grew serious. "Do you regret the choices you made?" "Not regret exactly," Catherine said thoughtfully. "But I think about all the relationships I've lost along the way. My mother still barely speaks to me because she thinks my career is frivolous. Most of my friends from home have gotten married and started families while I've been traveling the world for photo shoots. Sometimes I feel like I've gained the whole world but lost my soul, if that doesn't sound too dramatic." "It doesn't sound dramatic at all," Maya assured her. "It sounds honest. But, Catherine, look at what you're doing now with the shelter, with the charity work. You're using your platform for good. You couldn't do that if you were just another doctor in Manchester." Catherine considered this perspective while watching Maya's earnest face. Her friend had a point, but it didn't erase the loneliness or the sense that she had sacrificed essential parts of herself for professional success. The model in the magazine spreads looked confident and glamorous, but she often felt like that person was a character she played rather than who she really was. "I keep thinking about this conversation I had with David last week," Catherine said, referring to the young father at the shelter. "He was talking about his daughter and how he wants to be the kind of father she can look up to. He works these exhausting jobs and lives in temporary housing, but he has this clear sense of who he is and what matters to him. I envied that clarity." "You're developing that same clarity," Maya pointed out. "Look at how you've changed your work in the past year. You're being more selective, choosing projects that align with your values. You're using your social media differently, sharing more authentic moments. You're finding ways to make your career meaningful." Catherine smiled at her friend's optimism. Maya had always been her cheerleader, but she was also honest enough to call Catherine out when she was making poor decisions or wallowing in self-pity. Her encouragement meant more than any positive review or fan comment because it came from genuine love and understanding. "I have some news," Catherine said, her voice taking on a tone that made Maya sit up straighter with attention. "I've been offered a role in a documentary about homelessness in London. They want me to be one of the presenters, following families as they navigate the housing system and sharing their stories." Maya's eyes widened with excitement. Catherine, that's incredible. It's perfect for you. You'd be amazing at that kind of storytelling. I'm terrified, Catherine admitted. It's so different from anything I've done before. There's no script, no stylists, no perfect lighting. Just real people sharing their experiences, and me trying to help tell their stories in a way that might create positive change. What does your management think? Catherine's expression shifted slightly. They're concerned. They think it might damage my brand to be associated too closely with difficult social issues. They prefer the charity work to stay at the level of attending galas and writing checks. This tension had been building for months. Catherine's team had worked hard to establish her as a luxury brand ambassador, someone associated with beauty and aspiration rather than social problems. They worried that becoming too involved in advocacy work would make her less appealing to high-end fashion clients who wanted their campaigns to represent escape from everyday concerns rather than engagement with them. But, this matters to you more than maintaining a perfect brand image, Maya said, reading her friend's conflicted expression accurately. It does. And that's what scares me. I've spent so many years building this career, and now I'm considering choices that might jeopardize it. But, when I think about continuing to do photo shoots for luxury goods while people I care about are struggling to find housing, it feels hollow. Maya reached across the table and squeezed Catherine's hand. You know what I think? I think you're growing up. You're moving from caring about what people think about you to caring about what you think about yourself. That's not always comfortable, but it's necessary. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from the relief of being truly understood. Maya had articulated something she had been struggling to express even to herself. She was indeed growing up, even at 28, learning to prioritize her own values over external validation. The documentary would film over several months, Catherine continued. Some of it would be at the shelter, but they also want to follow families into their daily lives, show the reality of what homelessness looks like in London. It's not just people sleeping on the streets, it's families in temporary accommodations, people couchsurfing, children changing schools multiple times because their housing situation is unstable. When do you need to decide? Soon. They want to start filming in January, right after the holidays. The timing feels significant, you know? A new year, a new direction. Maya pulled out her phone and showed Catherine a photo from last year's Christmas carol service. In it, Catherine looked beautiful but distant, smiling politely for the cameras but with a guardedness in her eyes that spoke to her discomfort with the public attention. Look at this photo from last year, Maya said. Now look in the mirror. You're a completely different person. More open, more confident, more at peace with yourself. Whatever you decide about the documentary, trust that instinct that's been guiding you lately. It's serving you well. Catherine studied the photo, seeing what Maya meant. The woman in last year's picture looked like she was performing the role of a charitable celebrity, hitting her marks and saying the right words but not truly engaged. She could barely recognize that version of herself. I think I'm going to say yes to the documentary, Catherine said, the decision crystallizing as she spoke. Even if it changes everything about my career, I need to try something that feels meaningful. Good, Maya said firmly. And, tonight, at the service, remember that you're not just there to look beautiful in photos. You're there because you genuinely care about the cause, because you have relationships with people who benefit from this charity. Let that authenticity shine through. As if summoned by their conversation, Catherine's phone buzzed with a text from David at the shelter. Looking forward to seeing you tonight, it read. My daughter wants to know if you'll be wearing a princess dress. I told her you always look like a princess to me, but tonight you'll be our angel helping other families. Catherine showed the message to Maya, who smiled at the genuine warmth in David's words. See? That's what matters. Not the magazine covers or the brand partnerships. Making a difference in real people's lives. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the December evening deepen outside the window. The abbey's spires were visible in the distance, lit against the darkening sky. Soon, Catherine would be walking into that sacred space, photographed and admired, but now she understood that the real magic of the evening would come from the connections she made and the purpose she served. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Maya handed Catherine a small wrapped package. "A little something for tonight," she said. "Don't open it until you're at the Abbey." Catherine hugged her friend tightly, feeling grateful not just for the gift but for the conversation that had helped clarify her thoughts and strengthen her resolve. With Maya's support and her own growing confidence in her choices, she felt ready to step fully into this new version of herself, whatever the consequences might be for her career. The evening ahead would be another step in her journey toward authenticity, another opportunity to prove to herself that she could be both beautiful and meaningful, both successful and genuine. As they walked out into the London night, Catherine carried with her not just the excitement of a glamorous event, but the deeper satisfaction of knowing she was becoming exactly who she was meant to be. The black car pulled up to Westminster Abbey just as the December evening reached the magical hour when the last traces of daylight mingled with the warm glow of street lamps and building lights. Catherine sat in the back seat, her hands folded carefully in her lap to avoid wrinkles in her midnight blue dress, watching through tinted windows as photographers and news crews set up their equipment along the ancient stone walls of the Abbey. She had attended dozens of high-profile events over the years, but tonight felt different. The butterflies in her stomach weren't the usual anxiety about looking perfect or saying the right things. Instead, she felt the anticipation of someone about to do something truly important, something that connected to her deepest values and aspirations. Her driver, Thomas, caught her eye in the rearview mirror. He had been driving her to events for 3 years now and had become something of a grandfather figure, offering gentle wisdom and honest observations about the fashion world's sometimes absurd demands. "You seem different tonight, Miss Catherine," he said in his gentle Yorkshire accent. "More centered, if you don't mind my saying so." Catherine smiled at his perception. Thomas had seen her through panic attacks before red carpet events, had waited patiently outside therapy appointments, and had never once made her feel judged for her struggles with fame's pressures. "I think I'm finally figuring out what I want my life to be about," she replied. "It's taken me long enough." "Well, if my opinion counts for anything, you've always struck me as someone with a good heart. Sometimes it just takes time to find the right way to show it to the world." Before Catherine could respond, her phone lit up with a notification. She had been tagged in dozens of social media posts from fans who had gathered outside the Abbey, hoping to catch a glimpse of the celebrities attending the charity service. She scrolled through the comments, noting how many people expressed genuine excitement not just about seeing her, but about the cause she was supporting. One comment particularly caught her attention. A young woman had written, "Catherine's posts about the homeless shelter made me volunteer at one in my own city. She's shown me that beautiful people can do beautiful things. Can't wait to see her tonight." Reading those words, Catherine felt a profound sense of responsibility settle over her shoulders. She had never fully appreciated the influence her actions and choices had on people who followed her online. The realization that her authentic sharing about the shelter work had inspired others to get involved was both humbling and empowering. As the car drew closer to the Abbey entrance, Catherine could see the crowd of fans pressed against the barriers. Their faces lit up with excitement and phone cameras began flashing as they recognized her vehicle. Through the tinted windows, she could see signs and banners, some with her name, others supporting the homeless charity. "Ready for this, Miss Catherine?" Thomas asked, preparing to help her from the car. Catherine took a deep breath and opened Maya's gift, which she had saved for this moment. Inside the small wrapped box was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny house. The accompanying note read, "For someone who's helping others find home while finding herself. You're exactly where you're meant to be." The jewelry was simple and meaningful, so different from the expensive pieces designers usually loaned her for events. Catherine fastened it around her wrist, adding it to her minimal accessories. It felt like a talisman, a reminder of her purpose for being here. The car door opened and Thomas extended his hand to help her exit gracefully. The moment her feet touched the pavement, the crowd erupted in cheers and camera flashes illuminated the evening like indoor lightning. Catherine paused for a moment, taking in the energy and excitement, feeling grateful rather than overwhelmed by the attention. She walked slowly toward the Abbey entrance, stopping frequently to wave at fans, sign autographs, and take selfies. Unlike at fashion events where she was often rushed past admirers by security teams focused on maintaining her mystique, tonight she had time to actually connect with people. A teenage girl near the front of the barriers caught her attention. She was holding a handmade sign that read, "Thank you for caring about people like my mom." Catherine approached her, curious about the message. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, leaning close to be heard over the crowd noise. "Emma," the girl replied, clearly starstruck but determined to speak. "My mom lost her job 6 months ago and we had to move into temporary housing. She saw your interview about the shelter work and it made her feel less alone. She said it helped her realize that struggling doesn't make you less valuable as a person." Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had given that interview to a small online magazine, hardly expecting anyone to notice it among the countless celebrity features published daily. Yet here was concrete evidence that sharing her authentic experiences was reaching people who needed to hear them. "Your mom sounds like an incredibly strong woman," Catherine said, taking the girl's hand. "And you're an amazing daughter for supporting her through a difficult time. Things will get better, I promise." Emma's eyes filled with tears as Catherine signed her phone case and posed for a photo. The interaction lasted only a few minutes, but Catherine could see that it meant everything to this young girl who was dealing with circumstances far more challenging than anything Catherine had faced at that age. As she continued toward the Abbey entrance, Catherine was stopped by a journalist from the entertainment news program that was covering the event. The reporter, a woman about Catherine's age with sharp eyes and a professional smile, positioned herself strategically to capture the Abbey's impressive facade in the background. "Catherine, you look absolutely stunning tonight," the reporter began. "Can you tell us about your dress and your expectations for this evening's service?" Catherine recognized the standard celebrity interview format: compliment the appearance, ask about fashion choices, keep everything light and promotional. A year ago, she would have played along, discussing the dress designer and expressing generic enthusiasm for the charity cause. Tonight, she chose a different approach. "Thank you," Catherine said graciously. "But more than how I look, I'm excited about why I'm here. This charity has become incredibly important to me over the past year. I've had the privilege of getting to know some of the families they support, and their stories have changed my perspective on what it means to be truly successful in life." The reporter's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly not expecting such a substantive response. "You've been quite vocal lately about your involvement with homeless families. What drew you to this particular cause?" Catherine thought about how to answer honestly without exploiting the people she had met at the shelter. She wanted to share the impact they had made on her without turning their struggles into entertainment content. "I think I was looking for something real in my life," Catherine said thoughtfully. "My career has brought me incredible opportunities, but I was feeling disconnected from any deeper purpose. Working with families experiencing housing insecurity has taught me about resilience, community, and what actually matters in life. These aren't just statistics or charity cases, they're people with wisdom and strength who have enriched my life immeasurably." The reporter leaned in, sensing this was more interesting content than the usual celebrity soundbites. "There are rumors that you're considering expanding your advocacy work, possibly into documentary filmmaking. Can you confirm or deny those reports?" Catherine hesitated for a moment, aware that anything she said here might complicate her ongoing negotiations with the documentary producers and her management team. But she had committed to authenticity, and dodging the question would feel like a step backward. "I'm always looking for ways to use my platform more meaningfully," she said carefully. "If an opportunity arose to help tell important stories about social issues I care about, I would definitely consider it. The most rewarding work I've done lately has been the kind that happens away from cameras and red carpets." Before the reporter could ask follow-up questions, Catherine was approached by the event organizers who needed to brief her on the evening's schedule. She excused herself politely and was led toward the Abbey's main entrance, where other celebrity supporters were gathering for group photos. Inside the massive stone walls of Westminster Abbey, Catherine was struck by the profound sense of history and sacred purpose that permeated the space. The soaring Gothic arches and intricate stained glass windows created an atmosphere that made the evening's charitable mission feel even more significant. This wasn't just another networking event or publicity opportunity, they were gathering in a place that had witnessed centuries of worship, celebration, and community service. She was introduced to other supporters, including actors, musicians, and business leaders who had contributed to the homeless charity. What surprised Catherine was how many of them shared similar stories about finding deeper meaning through their philanthropic work. A famous television presenter spoke about volunteering at food banks, while a successful entrepreneur described starting a job training program for people transitioning out of homelessness. "It's funny how helping others ends up helping yourself," said Robert, a well-known actor who had been supporting the charity for several years. "I got involved because my publicist thought it would be good for my image. But, once I actually met the people we're serving, everything changed. This work has become the most important thing I do." Catherine found herself part of a community she hadn't known existed, celebrities who had moved beyond surface-level charity involvement to develop genuine relationships with the causes they supported. It felt like validation for the path she was choosing, proof that she wasn't the only one seeking substance beneath the glamour of public life. As they prepared for the service to begin, Catherine spotted David and his daughter in the congregation. He had mentioned that they would be attending as representatives of the families served by the charity. His little girl was wearing a red velvet dress and had her hair braided with ribbons, clearly dressed up for the special occasion. When David caught Catherine's eye, he smiled and waved, his daughter bouncing excitedly beside him when she recognized the princess lady her father had told her about. The sight of them filled Catherine with warmth and reminded her why she was truly there, not for the photographs or the networking opportunities, but for people like David who were working so hard to create better lives for their families. The Abbey began to fill with hundreds of guests, creating a mixture of celebrity glamour and genuine community support that felt unique among the events Catherine typically attended. She could see Margaret from the shelter seated near the front, looking dignified in a navy dress that Catherine recognized from the donation closet at the center. As Catherine took her designated seat among the other celebrity supporters, she felt Maya's bracelet against her wrist and remembered her friend's words about trusting the instincts that had been guiding her lately. Looking around at the beautiful sacred space, filled with people united in purpose rather than just social obligation, Catherine felt certain that she was exactly where she belonged. The evening was about to officially begin, and, with it, another step in Catherine's journey toward becoming not just a successful model, but a person whose life created positive ripples in the world. The cameras would capture her beauty tonight, but, more importantly, she would use her presence to bring attention to a cause that had given her life new meaning and direction. The first notes of Silent Night filled Westminster Abbey as the choir's voices rose in perfect harmony, their ethereal sound seeming to float upward toward the vaulted ceiling like prayers given wings. Catherine sat in her designated pew among the other celebrity supporters, but her attention was drawn not to the ornate surroundings or the photographers discreetly capturing moments from the sides of the sanctuary, but to the faces of the people around her who were experiencing this sacred music. She watched as Margaret from the shelter closed her eyes and mouthed the words to the familiar carol, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. Beside her sat a young mother Catherine recognized from recent visits, holding her toddler son who had fallen asleep against her shoulder during the gentle melody. These women had experienced loss and hardship that Catherine could barely imagine, yet they radiated a kind of grace and resilience that humbled her completely. David's daughter was 3 rows ahead, standing on the pew to see better despite her father's gentle attempts to encourage proper church behavior. Her eyes were wide with wonder at the pageantry and music, and, when she turned to whisper excitedly to her father, Catherine could see David's face transform with pure love and pride. In that moment, Catherine understood something profound about what it meant to have something truly worth protecting and fighting for. As the service progressed through readings about hope, compassion, and caring for the vulnerable, Catherine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she would have attended an event like this as a beautiful accessory, smiling for cameras and fulfilling social obligations without truly engaging with the deeper meaning. Tonight, she was here as someone who had been fundamentally changed by the people she was supposedly helping. The Archbishop's sermon focused on the Christmas story as a tale of a family experiencing homelessness, seeking shelter and finding kindness from strangers. His words connected the ancient narrative to modern realities in ways that made Catherine see familiar scripture with new eyes. When he spoke about how sacred encounters often happen not in palaces or places of power, but in humble circumstances among overlooked people, Catherine thought about her own transformation through relationships with shelter residents. During a particularly moving moment when a young violinist performed a hauntingly beautiful piece, Catherine noticed her phone buzzing silently with notifications. She glanced discreetly at the screen and saw that photos from her arrival were already circulating widely on social media. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, with fans expressing admiration not just for her appearance but for her obvious genuine engagement with the charity cause. One comment stood out among the hundreds: "You can see in her face that this really matters to her. She's not just posing for photos anymore. She's become someone who actually cares." Another read: "I've followed Catherine for years, but this is the first time I've felt inspired by her instead of just envious." Reading these responses, Catherine realized that her evolution toward authenticity was being noticed and appreciated by people who had been watching her career. The vulnerability she had feared would damage her image was actually creating deeper connections with her audience. People were hungry for genuine emotion and purpose, even from celebrities they had placed on pedestals. As the service moved toward its conclusion, the Abbey's massive organ began the opening chords of Joy to the World. The entire congregation rose to sing, and Catherine found herself surrounded by voices representing every level of London society, from titled nobility to families living in temporary housing, all united in this moment of celebration and hope. She looked around at the faces surrounding her and saw something beautiful happening. The artificial barriers that usually separated different social classes had dissolved in this sacred space. Margaret was singing beside a famous actress, David was sharing a hymnal with a prominent businessman, and his daughter was being gently helped with the words by an elderly philanthropist who had endowed several shelters across the city. When the final note faded and the congregation began to move toward the reception area, Catherine felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Emma, the teenage girl from outside the Abbey, now inside with her mother as special guests of the charity. "Miss Catherine," Emma said, her voice trembling with emotion, "this is my mum, Sarah." Catherine turned to see a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a tired but dignified bearing. Sarah extended her hand with a shy smile, clearly overwhelmed by meeting someone she had only seen in magazines and on television. "Emma told me you two met outside," Sarah said. "I wanted to thank you for being so kind to her. This whole evening has been magical for us. We never imagined we'd be inside Westminster Abbey for something like this." "I'm so glad you could be here," Catherine replied, genuinely meaning it. "Emma told me about your situation. How are things going now?" Sarah's expression grew more hopeful. "Actually, much better. I found a new job last month, and we're hoping to move into a permanent flat after the holidays. The charity helped us with the deposit and first month's rent. Being here tonight, celebrating with people who made that possible, feels like a dream." "It's not a dream," Catherine said firmly. "You and Emma deserve all the good things that are coming your way. You've worked so hard to get through a difficult time." As the three of them talked, Catherine was approached by a photographer from a major magazine who had been documenting the evening. Instead of asking for a solo glamour shot, he requested permission to photograph Catherine with Sarah and Emma, explaining that he wanted to capture the human connections that made the charity work meaningful. The resulting photo would later become one of Catherine's most treasured images, not because of how beautiful she looked in her designer gown, but because it captured a moment of genuine human connection. Her smile was radiant but natural, her posture relaxed and warm as she stood with her arms around the mother and daughter who had taught her about real courage and resilience. Later, as the formal reception continued, Catherine found herself in conversation with the documentary producers who had been observing her interactions throughout the evening. They had attended specifically to see how she connected with the people she would be helping to represent in their film about London's housing crisis. "We've been watching you tonight," said Marcus, the documentary's director. "What we've seen convinces us more than ever that you're the right person for this project. You have a natural ability to make people feel comfortable and valued. That's essential for the kind of intimate storytelling we want to do." Catherine felt her heart race with excitement and nervousness. "I've been thinking about our conversation all week. I want to do this project, but I need you to understand something. If I sign on, it can't be about making me look good or advancing my career. It has to be about honestly representing these families' experiences and creating change." "That's exactly what we want," assured Sarah, the film's producer. "We're not interested in celebrity charity tourism. We want to make something that challenges people's assumptions and motivates them to care about housing inequality. Your authentic investment in these issues is what makes you valuable to us." As they discuss logistics and filming schedules, Catherine felt the final pieces of her decision falling into place. Yes, this documentary might change the trajectory of her career in unpredictable ways. Yes, her management team would likely be frustrated with her choice to prioritize social impact over maintaining her luxury brand image. But, sitting in this historic abbey, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by compassion and generosity, Catherine knew she was ready to take that risk. The evening was drawing to a close when Catherine was approached by Margaret, who had been waiting patiently for a quiet moment to speak with her. The older woman looked elegant in her navy dress, her silver hair styled beautifully, but it was her warm smile that made her truly radiant. "I wanted to thank you before I left," Margaret said, taking Catherine's hands in her own. "Not just for tonight, but for everything you've brought to the shelter. You've reminded all of us that kindness doesn't depend on circumstances. You've shown us what it looks like when someone with privilege chooses to use it for good." Catherine felt tears gather in her eyes. "Margaret, you and David and all the families at the shelter have given me so much more than I've given you. You've helped me understand what really matters in life. You've made me a better person." "We've helped each other," Margaret said wisely. "That's how it's supposed to work. That's what community means." As guests began to leave the abbey, Catherine lingered for a few more moments in the sanctuary, looking up at the soaring architecture and feeling profoundly grateful for the journey that had led her here. The woman who had entered this building a few hours ago was somehow different from the woman preparing to leave. The same, but transformed by the evening's connections and conversations. Outside, the photographers were waiting for final departure shots, and Catherine obliged them with a few more pictures. But, instead of the practiced poses she had perfected over years of red carpet appearances, these images captured something more spontaneous and genuine. Her smile held the satisfaction of someone who had spent her evening in alignment with her deepest values. In the car ride home, Catherine finally allowed herself to fully process the decision she had made about the documentary. Tomorrow, she would call her management team and deal with their concerns about her changing image. She would work through the logistics of filming and the potential impacts on her traditional modeling career. She would begin the challenging but rewarding work of helping to tell stories that might change how people thought about homelessness and housing inequality. But tonight, as London's Christmas lights blurred past her window and the Abbey's bells chimed the hour in the distance, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with who she was becoming. She had found her way from the isolation of perfection to the warmth of authentic human connection, from the emptiness of surface success to the fulfillment of meaningful work. Maya's bracelet caught the light from passing street lamps, the tiny house charm reminding Catherine that sometimes the most important journey is the one that leads you home to yourself. She had charmed fans with stunning photos and elegant dresses tonight, just as the evening's title had predicted. But, more importantly, she had discovered that true beauty came not from flawless appearances, but from the courage to care deeply about something larger than yourself. The Christmas carol service had been everything she had hoped for and, more, a celebration of community, a reminder of purpose, and a confirmation that she was exactly where she belonged. As the car pulled up to her apartment building, Catherine felt ready for whatever challenges and changes lay ahead, knowing that she had finally found the authentic life she had been searching for all along.